Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. I greet you live from the All America city in Mooresville in North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America. And on this show, we talk about division, turbulence, global affairs, all kinds of things going on around the world. Today, I'm wearing my NC State sweatshirt because I'm proud my son will be attending NC State University, one of our major universities in the great state of North Carolina. And I want to make sure today that we talk about some of the major issues going on. First of all, there was a fire that broke out in Crimea. Inflation is still at 7.9%. There's a new political party that started in India called the Indian Inclusive Party, or they call it India. And they're basically trying to fight for democracy in India. Unbelievable that organizations like that are sprouting up in the world's largest democracy. And Donald Trump is still being investigated by federal prosecutors who are investigating his trying to overturn the elections. So that saga continues as we continue to look forward to the presidential elections of 2024. Meanwhile, I haven't had a chance to go watch the town hall, but it does look like Joe Manchin, United States Senator, will be running along Jon Huntsman, the former governor of Utah, the former ambassador to China under President Obama, and the former ambassador to Russia under President Trump, as a unity ticket, both claiming that both parties have gone to the fringes of their party and they need to fight from the center, from both parties, hence a unity ticket. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I think we have a guest today, so we're going to bring that guest on. I'm going to hand over to Mark Lee, and hopefully we'll have a wonderful, respectful, engaging show. And we welcome you to World Edition from wherever you are in the world or country.
Well, yes, we've got a guest on. Glad to have the guests on as well. They have been a guest here before, and I'd love to hear their thoughts about something that is going on. And of course, we've got Shaquille from down under, but many of us know Debbie Peterson from over there in California. I've been sending her invites over the course of several weeks and everything, but of course, she's very busy there in California and all along those lines. One of the things I was getting ready to ask Debbie as I bring her on, because I know that she oftentimes talks about corruption in politics and even some of the banter that goes back and forth with politics and some of that division that you were just talking about. And all along those lines is that recently we just had a new candidate enter here in Durham, in the Durham political race. And that was actually one that was involved in a lot of the banter back and forth and all in that space. And probably one of the reasons that our current mayor left the office and all in that space.
Who's that, Mark?
Deidreana Freeman is running for mayor. So she was, as you will remember, was one of those that was involved in a lot of that back and forth spats and things that were going on. And like I said, a lot of people feel that those arguments were part of the reason, including some things that were going on in their family, like getting a new husband, that our current mayor left office. But there was a lot of political division, a lot of arguing, even in the city council chambers and all along.
Don't you think Mike Woodard is still the front runner? Because
well, Mike Woodard is definitely the front runner. He's a state legislator and all in that space. But Deidreana Freeman is probably a stronger candidate than the other two fringe candidates and everything, just because of some of her own connections. And she just has some connections to Duke as well. But Debbie, just one of the things I was going to ask you, and like I said, I was glad to get you back on because I know you've talked a lot about what goes on in your politics and there in California. But do you think that some of the American public and even the world public is tired of a lot of this bickering back and forth that goes on, that a lot of times is almost personal attacks and things along those lines? But I know this happened in California. It's definitely happened in North Carolina, even here in Durham, like I just mentioned. And I know that from what I understand of your book, is part of what you were frustrated by, because a lot of people would like to hear the politicians talk the issues and not necessarily get into these personal attacks. But I'd love to hear your thoughts from the West Coast. And like I said, folks can go back and read about these different arguments that took place. I mean, I think they were yelling matches and even almost some fights that were breaking out. And well, they weren't quite fights, but they were near fights that were breaking out in our city hall and all in that spaces. But I do sometimes wonder if folks are not getting tired of this on a national, local, and even regional level. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. And of course, we've got Shaquille and also Lee Newton Rhodes. But what is your thoughts about this? Because like as I said, you've been on before, and I think that that's part of why you are maybe not as involved. I mean, you're still involved, but maybe not as involved on the front lines, for lack of a better term, and everything. But I'm rambling. But what are your thoughts? Do you think folks are tired of that notion of the infighting that is personal, for lack of a better term?
Well, thank you, Mark. It's really wonderful to be here. I see you and Steve. And I will tell you, I was at a homeowners association board meeting last night in Hawaii. And so it's actually 4 a.m. for me here. But I got on at this time because I've missed so many of your broadcasts, and I really did want to join you. And I can tell you, homeowners associations can be even more volatile, even more vile than city councils and our quasi-government agencies also. So I'm still in the thick of it from that point of view. And I'm going to read up on Durham. That sounds quite entertaining, interesting, probably disgusting in some levels as well. And really the reason I'm not so involved now, I did get burnt out on it. It's hard work. But the other thing is I've been at it for 20 years now, and my original plan had been to volunteer for 12 years and then move on. And I think that really was the intention when our Constitution was set up, that people would take time out to serve their communities in the same way that we serve our communities when there's a war, when we join the armed services, that we would serve our communities from a more legislative or administrative point of view as well. And it would be service. It wouldn't be for money. And it would be for a period of time. And then we would go back to whatever our careers were. We would go back to our homes. And George Washington, of course, was the perfect model for that. And so I do agree with you and about how destructive the infighting is, and that folks are tired of it. And I hear that a lot. And I said it myself last night. We're neighbors. Why can't we just get along? And I hear that from people all the time. And the reason that it's so destructive, for one point, is that we should be electing people who are following the model of serving for the purpose of service, serving others. And if they're serving themselves, if they're infighting, if they're calling names, if they're not dealing with the issues, then they are not serving others. And they've lost track, if they ever had track on it. So we really want to elect people who are serving others, not serving themselves. And the reason it's, apart from the graft that is involved when people serve themselves rather than serving their communities, or when that is their modus operandi, when that is why they're in office, apart from the graft and the ways that our funds go to the wrong places when that happens, the other thing that happens is we become disillusioned. And so people start thinking, well, I can't make a difference anyway, so why should I bother? And then we have fewer and fewer people involved in government, particularly in local government. And when that happens, then it's even easier for there to be graft and for our money to go where it shouldn't go. And I'm not just talking about politics or political viewpoints about what we do with the taxes we pay, but I'm talking about it going into the wrong pockets altogether, getting out of our public coffers and into private pockets. So it's incredibly destructive when that happens, and it would be so much more helpful if those who we elect to represent us were focusing on the issues rather than infighting, because it's really difficult. Unless you're very, very close, it's very, very difficult to determine what's the right side of the argument and who's telling the truth. That's a difficult call.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I was going to bring in Shaquille, also bring in Lee Newton Rhodes, who's already here. And actually, we do have one other, Toby, as well, and everything. But one of the things I was going to ask, and all along those lines, is that, and I'd love to hear Lee's thoughts about this. And Toby have some thoughts as well, because we've been talking about what Deidreana running and the bickering that has been going on in Durham and all along those lines. But sometimes people are concerned about what you just kind of alluded to, the ties to the special interest, because I know even here in Durham, and I'm just using Durham as an example, a microcosm of what goes on in the nation and the world, there were concerns about people having ties to developers when they are running for office, and maybe they are more tied and have more interest in the developers side of things, the ones that are giving them the money. And sometimes there's also the special interest, whether that's the drug companies or a number of other companies, education companies, and other things in that space. But Deb, you've been in the space, and Lee, you're running for president. What is your thoughts about this? Because do we have too many people that, for lack of a better term, have their hands in the pockets of the politicians? And I don't care whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, they just seem to have their hands in your pockets and are oftentimes influencing the decisions, maybe in a way that is too stringent, if I can use that word, and everything.
Well, corruption is neither Democrat, Republican, Independent, American, Independent, Green. Corruption is corruption. Right. It knows no party. And as you said, we get it all over the place, and it doesn't know sex either, although generally, statistically, we find that women are less corrupt when they're on boards. That isn't always the case. And so we have to choose wisely. One of the things that comes up in best political practices, really there should be no ties to development, no nepotism, none of those things, because even the appearance of corruption does that thing, which is to make us jaded, to make the public jaded, and to cause us to step away because we feel like there's nothing we can do anyway. And of course, when that happens, then we are hearing from less of the public. There's less representation. There's more opportunity for the opportunists who are serving themselves. And so I am one of those who would say, let's get all the money out of politics. Even disclosure. You can disclose, but that doesn't necessarily, okay, so you didn't do anything illegal because you disclosed. Hard to say. Hard to say. You might simply not put people off.
Before we get
it's been great to see you again, and I must apologize that I haven't been here since the first time we were on air together. I wasn't on your last few shows because I was traveling, but it was so fascinating to talk to you last time. And Grover Beach, I believe, is the town that you were the mayor of.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you got a good memory.
I do, and I told you I've actually been there. When I was driving down from Canada, we went all through California on our way into LA, and then finally over to Las Vegas. But I do want to just point out a couple of things that I think happens in politics, which it does get really frustrating because, look, I'm somebody who, I don't put my titles up very often. I'm the president of one of the chambers of commerce in the world that deals with multiple countries. And I meet politicians all over the world, and so many of them are like you. They care. And it doesn't matter what side of politics they're on, they actually really care. And they don't care at all whether there's some issues that I don't agree with them on. They're actually about what can we do in this area to make our area better. But unfortunately, it seems as though the higher up you get, the more disconnected they are from what really matters. And it ends up becoming, well, yep, I see what you're saying and I see why that's important, but I have XYZ lobby group telling me that if I don't do this, it's going to hurt the XYZers. And I've really got to look after them. And it ends up becoming this political minefield. And I think a lot of politicians, and probably like Steve, who obviously has much greater aspirations than just Durham, the problem is that the more political you get, the more up the chain you get, the more that I feel people lose what they originally entered politics for. And I've had some federal politicians in your country and a few other countries say to me, the problem with getting into politics in the first place is that half the people are going to hate you and half the people are going to like you. And you've got to walk around knowing that half the people hate you, even if they don't understand that you're actually on their side. Half the people are going to hate you, and I've found that to be really fascinating. And I just wanted to make a comment about what you mentioned there about getting the money out of politics. Look, I agree with you in principle. I do. But I think one of the issues that we have, and it goes both ways, sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's negative. Some of the issues that we have is that politicians are mostly made up and legislative bodies are mostly made up of lawyers. So the lawyers get together and they tell the doctors what to do. So the doctors need to have some representation, so they form a lobby group. In your country, it's the AMA. The teachers have a particular issue that's common to all of them, so they create the teachers' union. And I can just keep going on down the path. And it's not just on the left of politics, on the right of politics. The bankers get together and they have like a bankers association and all those sorts of things. So what you end up with is politicians who are receiving money and are receiving endorsements from these groups. But if we take that money out of it, how do industry groups and chambers of commerce and etc., how do they get to exert their influence? How do they get to say, look, we're an organisation that represents, for example, the Pacific Rim Chamber of Commerce that I'm part of. We represent 800,000 businesses across the Pacific. Most of those businesses are small family-owned businesses. How do we represent them if we can't put money into politics?
Well, there are a couple of things there. First of all, people absolutely should fund organizations that represent their interests. I have no problem with that. It's a question of, do those organizations then fund the politicians? Because, and I've been writing a regular blog for Psychology Today, and I'm absolutely not qualified to write about psychology, but I am qualified to study it and write about the studies. And I'm tasked with writing about women, corruption, happiness, and women and government. And so, but one of the things that has been found is that we have this innate thing in us of reciprocity. And if someone gives something to us, it is almost instinctive that we want to give back. And that operates with politicians. It's very hard not to want to give back. And, not to mention the fact that you are now more aware of someone because they've given you a sum of money. And so you can either limit the sum of money that is donated, or you can, take it out altogether, or you can make it public funding where everybody has a certain amount that they can throw where they wish to throw it. Throw is the wrong word probably, but they can place where they wish to place it. So it depends on whether money is being, yes, put it in organizations, but not.
Let me
get the. I forget the young lady's name, but Nancy Pelosi's daughter. Nancy Pelosi's daughter did a documentary fairly recently, before Trump. Did a documentary, I think it was in the 2016 election. She spoke to Republicans and Democrats, and she went around and spoke to the donors and the super donors, and asked them, why they were donating, that sort of stuff. And one of the donors made the comment that there wasn't enough money in politics. And I was quite taken aback when I heard that. But he actually made a point that I thought was actually really relevant. He said, we spend like $30 billion a year on advertising beer. We spend $2 billion on the election. What's the most important thing? And I thought that was a really interesting point. So I think money, should it be in politics? Maybe, maybe not. But I don't think the answer to solving this is going to be a simple answer. Sorry, Steve.
Not at all. I'm going to toss it over to Steve.
You're good. Yeah, I think for me, Debbie, it's great to have you back on the show. I can tell you that the longer, like for me, I'm in my fourth term on the city council, served as a deputy mayor for 4 years. In the last election, I'm a moderate Democrat. The Democrats did everything to unseat me. I'm actually the only person in the history of our city that's led the ticket in all 4 elections, the number 1 vote getter. And I take a lot of criticism by having moderates, Republicans, and independents in my base. Mm-hmm. But I really believe it's cities, and I am considering a run for a higher office in the next cycle, but either a council or state position or a congressional race. And we're waiting for the new seats. But at the end of the day, I think what's happened is that the politicians are picking party over people. And I think in cities, it's the last level of government where parties aren't really in, like a road, a bridge, infrastructure shouldn't be, just because you're a Democrat or Republican. And a lot of these social issues are being now run as litmus tests. Some of the issues we debate here, critical race theory, social issues, those kinds of things, which are important to address. But I think really the taxpayers of the cities don't send us here to do that kind of work. And so, and in respect to the Durham race, I'll just throw this in here as an analyst. I think this is a very interesting race, but I do believe that even though DeDriana Freeman is my friend, I think Durham needs experience to come back into the helm. And I've grown to like Mike Woodard. I mean, it's an interesting story because he was a city councilman in Durham and he went to the state Senate in 2013. And one of the things is he actually said one of the regrets he had was that he left the city because in the city he could see the achievements of his work. And he actually said, God, if I could do it over again, I would have loved to have run for the mayor of Durham. Well, a few weeks later, this happened and Mike Woodard is running for the mayor of Durham. But I think because he's been a state senator, Mark Lee, and because of his connections, I think he might be able to bring Durham back to the place they need to be. That's just my personal opinion.
No, I mean, one of the things I would say about Mike is that Mike is definitely one that gets out in the community. You can't go to an event without running into Mike.
Yeah.
A lot of the community events and like things of that nature. Now, some folks, and I'm not saying whether I agree or disagree, think, and I don't know how Lee handles it in New York or even Deb handles it there in the West Coast. But some people that when they criticize him, they feel that it is sometimes opportunistic when he pops up at events, because sometimes he will pop into an event, pop out of the event, and things of that nature. So sometimes people feel that he is playing politics, and I get it. You're a politician. You're supposed to play politics. You're supposed to get out there to be seen. But as I'm sure you know, Debbie, sometimes that can be a criticism because sometimes people will feel that you are there only to rub the hands and shake and hug the babies and do things of that nature. You're not really addressing or talking to the constituents the way that they would like you to talk to them. And I'm not saying that
Mark, that stuff is important though too.
Mike is actually a friend of mine.
No, but Lee, I'm not sure it is, and I think that's a mischaracterization of how politicians personally feel, the ones that I've met. And look, I've met presidents, prime ministers, I give advice to these people. They are human beings at the end of the day. And look, I'm probably the worst offender at this. I'm always sitting there going, the bloody politicians, they're just out there and, what makes them so I'm the sort of libertarian, anti-government, anti-politician person. I say it all the time. But the reality is that most politicians that I meet, even at the highest levels of government, they're not just out for themselves. They do actually care. They really do. And I think what happens is that it becomes a disconnect between what they started out wanting to do and where they are. Presumably I'm a centre-right person, right? So the political party in Australia that I support is a member of the IDU. So the Republican Party of the United States is a member of the IDU. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I should just side with the IDU, but I don't. On probably most issues, I actually support the Democrats' views on it. There's actually only a handful of views that I support on the Republican side. But here's what I've noticed. When I was on the show last time with Debbie and I were together on a show, there were some conversations that we were having about California, and Debbie said, actually, I'm really interested to hear this other viewpoint. And I had a viewpoint from not just an American, because I'm not an American person, but a viewpoint on a cultural issue. Steve Rao, I won't go into our conversations, but Steve Rao has asked me questions quite frequently about, well, Shaquille, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? I'd like to have a different perspective. Whether or not he agrees with my perspective or not is totally different, but he'd like to hear it. And I think that what we're seeing today is a media that describes politicians as being so biased that they can't understand or don't know what the counter view is. And that's not really reality. A lot of politicians know what the counter view is, but they just don't agree with it. But that's not how they're depicted. And we have a very divided media. And I think that adds to that sort of division and that feeling of, well, to hell with the politicians, what good are they? They're just these horrible people that are just out to suit themselves. That's not really the case. And that is the first and only time that I will publicly defend the politicians. So just
but along those same lines, and I'm going to bring in Toby, who's been trying to get on there for a while, as well as Lee Newton Rose. But one thing that I hear sometimes, and I'd love to hear your thoughts because you are running for a presidential office and all in that space, is that sometimes people get concerned about, let's just say, development. There are examples of developers that are here in Durham, and they will give money to a project, and then folks are feeling that those developers have too much ties to whatever is going on, whether that's in the gentrification space. And it's not always gentrification. Sometimes it's just development in areas that even need development and all along those lines. But they are feeling that they are too tied to the developers. We've heard that in Durham. We've heard that here in Raleigh. We've heard that all over the country. And we've definitely, I would argue, and Shaquille, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we've heard it in other parts of the world as well, because I've heard this conversation, because I do have friends from African nations and Asian nations and even some of the European nations. So I think it's a conversation that exists globally and not just here in the United States, because people are wondering if the developers don't have too much control. I mean, that's part of the argument that I've heard on about not just Trump, but also Biden. Do they have too much ties to some of these corporate folks and all in that space? But Lee, you are running, and who knows, maybe at some point you're running as a independent, as I understand it, and who knows, you've mentioned the third party candidacy and no label. Maybe you'll get recruited by them and all along those lines. But what is your thoughts? And do you ever have any concerns about that from the Northeast? Because you are coming at us from New York, which is, of course, is a banking and development mecca, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure exactly what your question is, but if you remember when Trump, before he was president, they asked him about money and politics. He says, look, I'm a businessman. I give to both sides. I have a business to run. You're not going to take money out of politics. You can clean it up as much as you want. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not.
No, I'm just asking more.
Businessmen need to have businesses run smoothly.
I think, Lee, though, that the point about money, and I can address this to Debbie and Steve as well, the point about money in politics is, if I'm a widget maker and there's a new law that's just come out in Grover Beach that is going to make it more difficult for me to sell my widgets or to manufacture my widgets, and it's an unintentional law. They didn't mean for me to be hurt, but the repercussion of that law is, hey, like, I'm not going to be able to manufacture my widgets anymore. I'm going to go and knock on Debbie's door and say, Mayor Peterson, hey, like, I need to talk to you because myself and all the people that I know that are in the same industry, we're having this issue. Is that lobbying? Or is that us saying, hey, like, there's this problem, we need to discuss it? And I would expect the door to be open for me so I can discuss it. But then we move a step forward and say, okay, well, Mr. Smith down the road, he is not going to support what I'm saying. He doesn't care. He's not even going to listen to what I'm saying about how me making widgets, is being affected. But Mayor Peterson is. So I'm going to endorse Mayor Peterson, and I'm going to put my money behind her, and I'm going to fund an advertising campaign for her because it's in my interest, and I want the public to know how badly I'm affected if candidate Smith wins. So when you say take the money out, I'm not sure it is as simple as that.
But I want to put this
Shaquille, but the decisions should be made based on the merits of the case, not based on how much money is changing hands.
Yeah, but Lee, the fact of the matter is, here's the bottom line. Let me put this in perspective. We could talk about all these third parties and no labels and what Joe Manchin is doing. But let's just take North Carolina for an example, okay? In the next year's Senate race in 2026, they're predicting it's going to be $800 million race for Tom Tillis between the Republicans and Democrats. $800 million to reelect a United States senator, our senior United States senator, or if Roy Cooper, the governor, runs, most likely the former, at that time, will be the former governor. In 2000, we only spent $2 billion on federal elections. That number is now $16 billion. Even in North Carolina, to win a legislative seat, it takes $500,000. To be the governor of North Carolina, it takes $12 million. To be a U.S. senator, it used to take $20 million. Now it takes $200 to $300 million to be a U.S. senator. So the fact is, until we amend the Constitution and say that we cannot have money come in, that is what is controlling the politicians. It's just about how much money. I mean, to get 1 hour of ad time.
Steve?
But listen to me, let me finish. In the old days, back in the early 2000s, you could run ads on all the major networks for about $30,000. Now it costs $190,000 to $200,000 an hour. $200,000 an hour for TV spots. So you have to raise $300 million just to be on the TV. So
No, I get all that, but if you look at running for politics,
the problem you have, Steve, is that you come from such a place of privilege, right? Because you're so good looking, you're such a great, likable person, you're such a great candidate that nobody would have to spend any money to get you re-elected. That would just happen naturally. Of course they're going to have to spend so much money to fight you, my friend. How else would they have a chance?
no, but I mean, I have to. It's just not fair, even for me. It's about the money. If I can't raise that money, I won't even have a chance. You know?
Well, and that's the problem. The richest man wins, or the richest woman wins.
The special interest win. The special
Or
interest
the
win.
special interest wins. But remember, the most important thing is that every single one of us has an opportunity to voice our views and voice our opinions. And so it's not just about special interests. The special interest may have a large following. Who knows, maybe even 10% of the population, but there's 90% of us out there who maybe have different interests and all have a vote and all have the opportunity to speak with our legislators and all have the opportunity to explain the pros and cons from our point of view. And as you say, then we've elected them to make the hard decisions, the ones that are most beneficial to the most of us. And there are ways. I agree that it takes money to put a message out, and that the message should be out there, and that we should spend money getting out there. It's a question of balancing that money so that there's equal opportunity. There are ways to do that, and that I think takes some of the inequality out of it and help there be a better balance on the message and on the issue, as opposed to on who has the most money.
Speaking of special interest, and I'm going to
Jimmy,
divert.
how do you do that in the context of? Let me use an example. The United States started subsidizing sugar, and they subsidized sugar and put tariffs on foreign imported sugar. The result of that was two things. One, it helped protect the sugar industry in the United States. But the other result was it made sugar more expensive for the consumer. And I think from memory, because it's something happened in like the 70s or 80s, so this is something that I learned studying economics. So my figures might be a little bit wrong here, but it was a difference of something like 9 cents a pound. The everyday person was hurt by this, but 9 cents a pound in sugar is not enough to make the everyday person go to government, go to their local representative and say, hey, what's going on? Why am I paying 9 cents a pound more for sugar? Because it's not really that great an effect on their lives. So the criticism that was leveled was, here we had a special interest group that lobbied government on behalf of the sugar producers, and the result is negative for everybody, but it's a relatively small negative, but it shouldn't have happened. But the counter side of that is, if you get rid of special interest groups, to go back to my example of the widget maker, how does the widget maker link up with other widget makers and say, we need to approach government as a group and let them know that they've done something or they're passing something that's going to hurt us?
Well, you don't buy their vote. You tell them. You don't have to buy votes.
No, but one of the things, hold on a second.
And you're correct, but we also know that corporations can't vote. Big companies can't vote. Most people work for small businesses, but the small business can't vote. So how do we make that fair and equitable, where the businesses who are being affected have the opportunity to talk to government? If we were to go down the path of saying, we're not going to allow you to put money into politics, but we need to curtail the influence of special interests, how are those businesses to be able to interact?
When organizations like the ATF or the Teamsters come, they come because they have a number of followers a number of people in there they represent. It's not just money. It's people who are going to vote the way they tell them to vote.
But Lee,
So whether it's widget makers or whatever.
Lee,
No, but
along the
Lee,
same lines,
you're right in what you say, but the Teamsters is a union representing people, right?
I get that.
Business representatives normally will form special interest groups that will lobby government. So I'm not trying to defend them. I'm just saying that if you're going to have the opinion that we should take the money out and we should curtail the influence of special interests, remember that businesses are not as numerous as individual citizens are, but they do have a major economic impact on the country. So how do they get to express what's in their interests?
Well, it's really very simple mathematically, because those simple mathematically, those businesses have a double advantage because they are made up of people and each of those people has a vote. And then those people can organize and they can put money into that organization so that that organization can then go to their representatives and put forth their opinions, their feelings, the implications of the decisions. I'm not saying that people can't organize and go to their legislators, their representatives. I'm saying that they shouldn't buy their representatives, throw money at their representatives.
But Deb, just really quick, hold on a second. Deb, one of the quick questions, because I'm actually going to toss it to Sasha real quick and everything. Because one of the things that happens that, in my opinion, I don't know that everybody on this panel is going to agree or not, is that a lot of times some of the special interests are doing things and people are caring about the day-to-day impact. They're not really caring about where it's coming from. I'm going to use the example of Ukraine and Russia. We know that right now Russia has pulled out of the grain deal, which means that a lot of people are concerned in the political lane that we are going to turn to China, which also has a significant amount of grain and all in that kind of way and all along those lines. But I don't know that the average citizen, and Debbie and Lee Newton Rhodes and even Steve, you can correct me, and Shaquille and Sasha, really cares where the grain is coming from. They just want to know whether they're going to get the food item on the plate in order to get the substance, and they don't really necessarily care that it's coming from either China or Russia. We might be should caring because it's the impact of the war that is going on there, but I don't know that the average citizen really cares. They just want to know that they're getting their grain and everything. But what is your thoughts, Debbie and Lee and even Steve? Because that is something that I've heard even political politicians talking about, is the notion of us switching from Russian grain to China grain.
Well, those are first world problems. If you're in the first world, you can afford to care where it comes from. If you're in the Ukraine and you're being bombed and your home is gone, you can't afford to care where it comes from. You have to eat. Right. And I don't think there's much more I need to say about that.
Yeah, I agree. And everything.
Sasha, there is truth to. I'm not disagreeing with Debbie, but in America, for example, in the free world, people do vote with their feet and with their purses. Yeah. We see Bud Light now. People want beer, but that's not the beer they want. And the same thing, it could be Ukrainian beer or Israeli beer or Australian beer or whatever. People do vote with their purse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on just two things. One, Americans voting with their feet and buying Foster's beer. We don't drink that crap in Australia, so can you guys please knock it off? Don't encourage them, please.
You can't give it away.
But secondly, when it comes to voting with our feet, look, it's great to say that, but then. So one of the things that I've talked about before is about unions, for example, right? Where unions have rightfully so fought for workers' rights, better conditions, better pay. Mm-hmm. However, those better conditions of pay have created a situation where businesses locally onshore in our countries, Australia, America, Canada, right? Those countries have got these conditions that are so expensive that they can't compete with cheaper imports from other countries where they may be employing people in ways that are not acceptable to us. It might be child labor, there may not be very good ventilation, etc. So then those people, they form a group and they say, look, I'm manufacturing this thing and we're being undercut by international, companies. we want you to protect us. We want there to be a special tariff, or we want there to be whatever. The steel industry went through this in the United States in the 80s. Both sides actually have a reasonable point. The consumer has a reasonable point that why should I have to pay more for something that can be, brought in from overseas much cheaper? But the business owners there also have a point of, look, if you want me to look after the workers, I'm happy to do that. But now I'm being undercut by competitors that you're allowing in because we have free trade. So, like, what's the proper answer here? What's the solution?
Shaquille, it's not just people that are undercutting. And I'd love to hear Debbie's talked about this because she was mayor of a town that was near Los Angeles. But as I understand it, and I do have friends in that space as well, part of the concerns that the folks in the entertainment world have with the whole strike is the notion of other forces, AI and other things taking over in all of that space, because part of their concern is that they will be replaced by technology and all of that. And it's not just in the entertainment world. I think that this is just a example of what will be coming in other union fights and everything, because there are a number of things, even the restaurant industry is concerned and everything. But what is your take, Debbie, as one that live in that area?
Can I just interject something along the same lines what you're talking about, but just to finish what I was saying? Mark, a lot of people, like Tucker Carlson talks about this, the displacement of workers. That's the same thing that I'm saying. But if you're going to talk about displacement of workers, you also have to talk about how do businesses express that this is a problem that they're experiencing. Let's have a look at penicillin, something I've talked about a lot over the years, especially since COVID. There are 4 penicillin manufacturers in the world. 4. A very, very small one in Austria that doesn't even create enough for Austria, and the other 3 are in China. Forget about the politics of it. If there's an earthquake or a hurricane or like some other kind of event, what happens? And we already know what happens. We end up with a massive spike in penicillin prices across the world. Now, we here in the West have massive stockpiles of penicillin, but the poorest nations on earth don't. Right. So someone explain to me, why is there not a penicillin factory in California or New York or Florida? Why is there not one in Canada or Australia or New Zealand or the UK? Why are we allowing these jobs to be taken from us? It doesn't cost much on a per capita basis to have these factories. We're losing our manufacturing, we're losing our strength, and it's not just a complaint that should come from the workers, it's also a complaint that comes from business. We need both sides of politics to address these issues, and my fear is that wealthy Western countries like ours have a political system that unfortunately is either unable or unwilling to address these very serious concerns. Over to you, Debbie.
Yeah, Debbie.
Well, I completely agree with you. And I do think that one of the jobs of government is to think more universally than simply our country. This saying that all ships rise with the tide is true. And we saw that in COVID. And a pandemic is universal. And the need for penicillin is universal. And if we have infections spreading in India, they will spread in the United States. And so it's actually a simple survival that even the wealthiest nations must look after those that are not as wealthy. And those are issues that we must deal with. And it means that we must work with business. And it comes back again as Rouse said, that we have to look at as Steve said, we have to look at all of the issues. And I don't think we can box ourselves in and say we don't do business, we are government, or we have to be open-minded and we have to look at all of it. And I'm with you 100% on that. And I lost track. We were talking about another topic before you jumped in that I wanted to say something on.
Oh, we're talking about the strike, the Hollywood strike.
Oh, the strike in Hollywood. Yes. That's an interesting one, because I think often we think Hollywood, we think glamour, but we forget that there are a whole lot of people and businesses that are completely around in industry. And it's not just the wealthy that are affected. Screenwriters usually work on commission. They work on a screenplay. They work on a project. And every time you make a film, it is one single project. It's one business, but it's short term. And then you move on to the next one. And so it's a huge risk, even on the part of the very wealthy who are funding the films that make all that money, that support all these people and hire thousands, tens of thousands of people to be made. And so it's a huge industry. And what's happening is we're seeing a shakeout as the industry changes. We have, all of a sudden, we have Netflix, we have Apple, we have Google, we have all these players coming in and producing films and producing screenplay in a completely different way than it's ever been done before. It's not just big movies. Now it's series that you see on television and that you can stream on the internet. And all of a sudden, the way the money comes in is very different. And so it's not just AI that's squeezing out your cameraman and your light man and your all the people surrounding the industry are being affected. And so it's a huge change in the way the business is being done. And the very big wealthiest businesses in the country are squeezing it.
Yep. Lee, you had something you
Tim,
wanted to say?
you wrote a fascinating book. I'm sorry if I get the title wrong. It's been a while since I've read it, but I read it. Is it sleaziness, death, and suicide, or sleaziness, corruption, and suicide in a beach town? Great book. You've gone through the ordeal of, you've written the book, and then you've gone through the ordeal of trying to get it published and talking to the publisher and, getting it out there, that sort of thing. I think that's what you're talking about when it comes to the media industry, the strikes at the moment. Different people are involved in this industry in a different way. There's some risks being taken. If I said to you, hey, I really love your concept, I'm going to give you $1 million before you read the book, before you've written the book, in order to create the book, and I want a percentage of it. And then the person who printed the book wants a higher percentage of the book successful. It's a little bit difficult to kind of work out what's fair in that situation. So you're right. Most people are on commissions. It's complicated.
Yep. Lee, you had a question. You're on mute, but you're on mute right now, Lee.
Can I go?
Yes, you.
Yeah. Why should the average citizen care about the entertainment industry so much? It's not really an essential business, is it?
Well, it's a business that it is a business. It exists, and it's a business that we all love and we rely on, and it's something we all want.
But it's not something that we need, like for medicine, for teaching, for living, for an everyday life. It's something on our downtime, so to speak.
Yeah, first world problem again. But
Right.
It's something that we're interested in.
Hold on a second, Lee. I got to back up on you and Debbie and everything, because I would argue, and I am one that is biased because I am in the field, and I will admit to my biases and everything. But if you look at people in the arts, and I think even Sasha has brought this up as well, there is a lot of development within critical thinking and the things that you learn if you are learning a musical instrument, and there are things that are much more than just the aesthetics. So I think that it actually helps in the overall development of humans around the world. So I would argue that it is actually an essential. I can't think of a place that the arts don't have an impact in our life now.
Mark, the arts are important. They're important in life. I get that, and I agree with you. But we have a fentanyl crisis. We have a homeless crisis. We have a southern border crisis. We have a Ukraine-Russia crisis. We have a lot of other things that I think are much higher up in terms of importance than entertainment and passing time.
Well, I would argue.
I agree with you on that. I'm not saying government should get involved, but hey, we can all look at and be involved and interested in whatever we want. And there are a lot of people who are involved in that. And so you ask the question, I answer the question. I'm not suggesting that local government get involved.
But and the other thing
don't forget about entertainment. One thing very important: there are no minimum wages in entertainment industry. Okay?
Are there not?
No, there are not minimum
I
wages.
don't think that's accurate. At least,
Because you can hire somebody that pay him $2 an hour. If he agrees, he's going to work.
no, in theory, I agree with that. But I think they have unions.
They have unions, but don't.
But not everybody's on the unions. A lot of community people, a lot of others are not working those union jobs.
You cannot put creative people in a union environment and tell them, okay, you write this line, so you get paid $75. But if you write a line and a half, then you should get $115. It's impossible to do. So people really who are going into entertainment, same as music industry and many others, they have to do it for the love of their craft. And in love, you have to sacrifice, and sometimes a lot. So these people are already doomed by the choice of their profession, their lifestyle, or so on. So in any case, their lifestyle, their income will be on a very, very low side. And that they have to accept it, and maybe there are just too many writers, and maybe it needs only half of the writers to do the same job. Who knows? Maybe that's the case. So I feel not sorry, because when people love, do you feel sorry for people who are in love? Probably not. So let them be in love. And in my young years, when I was a pianist, I've realized in 1 year I made 5 times as much money on the stock market than playing piano all year, sometimes 6 nights a week. And I decided, since I cannot play 5 pianos at the same time, that's not the way to go. And
there's an entire movement going on in the art world, and I'm not saying that I agree with every aspect of it, but there is a notion, and I'm sure that as one that is in the West Coast, Debbie has heard of it. I'm sure even Shaquille has heard of it, but there are a lot of folks that are talking about this notion of decentralization and all along those lines. So they are trying to find ways, and some of them we may agree with. I've seen some that is making a whole heap of money, and I may not even think that it is worth what they are getting and everything. But there is the whole notions around NFTs, and there's whole NFTs that were very Andy Warholish looking in my mind and everything, but they were making a whole heap of money and all in that space. I think they were called the Bored Apes or something along those lines, but they made a whole heap of money and all in that space because they were trying to find a way to get more financial control than they had in the older models. So they were trying to do a newer model, and I don't know if Shaquille's, one of Shaquille's or a couple of Shaquille's business partners have been looking at that space or not with some of the films that he has been investing in and all in that space. But he can say whether they are not all in that lane because he's the one that talks directly.
I'll start off quickly by reminding Sasha when he says that he's not sure if people would feel sorry for people that are in love. I did tell him when I was in Toronto with him that as a very happily single guy, I feel very sorry for the people in love. They talk about how lovely it is, and you come home and the person's sitting there and they're happy. It sounds dreadful. I can't imagine being happy with just one person. It sounds awful. But moving right to Mark Lee's question, no, I do. I have business partners. I have lawyers and the people that work for the law firms that I'm a stakeholder in, who tell me all of this weird and wonderful stuff about NFTs and cryptos and, this whole world that I don't think I'm that old. I'm 39, so I'm not that old, but I've missed something. And I put it down to California. I love California. I think California is awesome. They've got great farming land, world's 5th biggest economy. Then they brought us, they had oil there for a while. Then they brought us tech. Now they're bringing us cats with little tiny pixels that was like worse than what was on the computer screen when I was 12 that are being sold for $60 million. And the worst thing is I can't criticize him because, hey, if you can get $60 million for it, you go, buddy. But I just don't get it. I don't understand it. They're like, yes, but nobody else could possibly get that cat because you've got that cat pixel thing. It's got its own address and it's its own thing. So if anyone else uses your cat, they can't. I'm like, yeah, but the cat looks like shit. What am I going to do with this cat? So I don't understand it. I don't get it. I probably will, but something there is happening.
I will help
Okay,
you.
I didn't get the board
Have
ape.
you ever heard
Please,
about?
please do so, John.
Have you ever heard about money laundering? So if
Hmm.
you
No,
If you
so,
have-
Yeah.
so we were talking about California. We're not talking about the art deals in France. That's a whole different situation.
No,
That's, that's
Hey,
legitimate.
Deb,
Those
we're getting
$500
hold on a
paintings,
second. Deb, we're
that's
getting
totally,
to
that's
get
totally
on out of
legit.
here. This has been a very wonderful discussion. I know Joey was trying to jump in, and I'll call him and find out what was happening. He would look like he was out on the field on this particular day and everything. So he might have even been at the ballpark getting ready for a game, for all I know, and everything. But just really quickly, one of the things that is going on, Deb, and Lee kind of alluded to it, and we can jump on this tomorrow, and hopefully you'll join us again either tomorrow or Friday or whenever I send you the link. But I was glad you were able to come on this time. And by the way, Steve, I am reaching out to both Deidreana and Mike Woodard, so hopefully we'll have one of them come on and they can talk about what's going on here and their political campaigns themselves and everything, so they can find out how Morrisville, where you are, compares to Durham, where they are, and all in that space. But Deb, just really quickly, one of the things that I had heard, and Shaquille's going to love me for bringing this up, particularly at the end, but apparently, and Lee kind of alluded to it, the Biden administration is going after DeSantis, who is the second runner, because of the so-called cultural war fights, and they are saying that it is a quote-unquote contrived political stunt. I would say that it might be a political stunt on both sides, but that's just my opinion and everything. But what is your thoughts about these political wars and these political conversations? Are they driving us away from the real issues that we need to be talking about, Deb? What is your thoughts about that? And then I'll toss it to Steve for the closeout.
Of course they are. They're diversions. And let's talk about the issues. And I steer away from politics talking about anybody, because I think the message that we all need to be involved is more important than the parties. And just to let everybody know, it's The Happiest Corruption, Sleaze, Lies, and Suicide in a California Beach Town is the name of the book.
Sorry,
And
Debbie.
thank-
I'm sorry.
No,
I have read
thank you for bringing it up. You did my job for me.
Mark, I'm going to go ahead
And
and
Debbie,
send my
if you ever
closeout.
come to Australia, we are short of politicians over here that are people of good temperament, good moral, and good courage. So you're welcome to run over here. I'll back you.
Maybe I'll come over.
Just watch the kangaroos and the snakes, but we'll look after you.
Was
Mark,
it
I'm going
just
to
the
go ahead and
kangaroos, or do we have to watch out for the koala bears too? I forgot. You look like a koala bear, Shaquille. So is it the koala bears we have to look for as well? Steve, close that out.
yeah,
And don't
I've got
forget,
one.
we've got Modern Investment at 1 o'clock. So definitely Sasha will be talking about that investment. He's got a newer guest that I'm hoping will be joining as well, as along with Milan and his regulars and all in that space. But they'll be talking about investments, and who knows, they might be talking about NFTs for all I know, but they'll be definitely talking about investment. But Steve, get us on the closeout.
Go ahead and close out. Basically, a couple of days ago, Fareed Zakaria had a wonderful documentary on immigration, and we're going to talk about that later in the week, next week, maybe bring in this guest, talk about illegal immigration, and why it's so hard for the U.S. to have a streamlined immigration system, while many countries like Canada and Germany and Europe are looking at merit-based immigration, and much of the global talent is leaving the U.S. to other parts of the world. This is going to affect our economic growth, and many people do believe a brain drain is already going to start occurring in the United States. With that being said, I just want to give a shout out for Major League Cricket. I'll be doing a monologue tomorrow, but it's hard to believe that a park that we opened up in 2015 in Morrisville in Wake County, the Research Triangle, is now going to be home to some of the best cricket players in the world. The Major League Cricket is actually taking a lot of investments from the Indian cricket leagues, and many of the top players in the world are now feeding into this Major League Cricket. The first inaugural season here of the Major League Cricket Championships in Texas, in Dallas, and now in Morrisville, North Carolina. Let's also keep in mind that the first game in cricket in the U.S. was played in 1844, and it was between the U.S. and Canada. And now there's a rebirth or an awakening of cricket, because many immigrant communities, many from India and South Asia, are bringing this game back into the local community, particularly in the more urban areas of the country. Quite amazing, quite exciting. All tickets are sold out. You can go to majorleaguecricket.com, and I'm going to invite my Roku and Pod TV folks to come to get some media passes. I'm working on that. But we'll talk about that. And I do think it is a reflection of good things that happen when people from around the world bring their cultures and passions and their cuisines and their sports, favorite sports to the United States of America, we can really transform our community. So on that note, I want to thank you all for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow for another edition of Pod and Roku TV's edition. Be safe wherever you are in the world. Have a great summer, and we'll talk to you soon.